Rev up your engines! Lately, I've met a lot of people who were whining about the extremely expensive cost to fix in their car's AC systems and what you can do to prevent as many possible needed repairs as possible. Now, back in the day, like this 94 Celica, cars were a lot simpler with their AC systems. They had a compressor, you can see. There's the bottom of the compressor down there with the light on it, with a magnetic clutch. When you turn the AC on, electricity went to the magnetic clutch. That made the compressor internally start pumping refrigerant. Then the hot refrigerant went in the condenser, dissipated heat, then was sucked inside the car to the evaporator. The evaporator's inside here. That would blow cold air in your face. And then when the refrigerant on the low pressure side came out of the evaporator, it was sucked back into the compressor, where it then was compressed again, and the cycle goes on and on and on. And the controls are fairly straightforward. You'd push the AC button to turn it on, turn the fan on, and it would blow cold air. And this is so old, if it got too cold, you could actually add a little heat to mix it with hot and cold to make it the temperature you want. Even though it's not automatic, you could adjust it manually. But even in this 29-year-old Toyota, it still had AC computer controls. It had a little computer module, the AC amplifier that helped run the system. It wasn't as simple as the electricity went to the button to the compressor. There were still little microprocessors involved. But with modern vehicles like this brand new Tacoma, the computers have gone bonkers. See, with my fancy scan tool, here is the air conditioning system. Granted, it's a brand new vehicle. It's got 1,500 miles on it, so this doesn't have any problems. There's no codes or anything yet. But check this out. Everything's run by computers. And as you see here, we'll look at live data. There's a room temperature sensor, ambient temperature sensor, engine coolant, speed of the blower motor, ambient temperature adjusted, evaporator fin thermistor, regulator pressure, and it goes on. Auto mode, compressor mode, shift set temperature, type of refrigerant, heater count, driver side temperature, passenger side temperature. Because as you can see here, you can change the temperature. You can make one side high, one side low, or set it whatever one you want for each side. And of course, all that is run by, you guessed it, computers, microprocessors. So if something goes wrong with a system, you're going to have to find a guy like me with equipment like this that can do bi-directional testing, as in the actuation test. Look at the things. You can check the motor, the heater, the relay electrical fan, the relay on the magnetic clutch. So we're talking about an insane level of technology. Guys that really know how to work on these systems, they're going to charge you a ton of money when they break down. So what's your solution to that? Well, buy a Toyota. They don't break much, right? But aside from that, maintain what you have. Unlike the old systems that basically had no maintenance at all, other than you made sure they had refrigerant in it, these are all run by computers. You want to make sure your electrical system is in tip-top shape. Check the battery. Make sure it's not corroded. A lot of times under these rubber covers, they'll get corroded. You want to make sure they're clean, they don't wiggle, they're not loose, and any electrical connectors are tight and clean. If the battery sending electricity to the system isn't working right because either the battery's weak, the connectors are corroded, or the connectors are loose, that creates an additional strain on the electrical system. You can get electrical pulses that can burn out computer systems, including the computer system in the AC. So in this case, the old expression, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, does not apply. You want to check your battery every once in a while. Because a weak battery might start your car up fine. But if it's not producing enough electricity, the alternator will have to work harder. You can get voltage surges through the system that can destroy not just the AC system, but all other systems, but especially the AC system because of all the computer controls on them these days. And to give you an example how crazy it's got, this is what's called a variable displacement AC compressor, right? And you notice I'm spinning it. The middle spins. You know why? Because this is a clutchless system. There is no magnetic clutch in this. The compressor's always spinning. And inside the compressor, there's various valves and solenoids that the computer operates to make the compressor work at either zero pumping pressure up to 100% and anything in between. All run by computers. Not even a magnetic clutch. This is all run by little bitty solenoids inside that the computer operates. Now you might think, why would anybody make something so complicated? The old magnetic clutches generally lasted a really long time, simple to diagnose these. They're always running, so it's much harder to diagnose them. The reason they went to it is because they get better gas mileage. They're more efficient, but you're talking about such a small amount of fuel savings. Now they talk about how this is more efficient, saves gas mileage. Absolutely no one I could find did a scientific study to see how much gas mileage they save. But from my experience, it's much less than 1 mile per gallon versus a conventional air conditioning compressor. It doesn't really make all that difference. Because realize this, a study was done years ago, and I had a customer do the same thing. He drove a Ford Mustang to Indianapolis from Houston for the race with the AC on and the windows rolled up. Then he drove it back with the AC turned off and the windows rolled down to cool him. And he found out he got about the same gas mileage whether he ran the air conditioner with the windows rolled up so there was less drag on the car, or with the windows rolled down so there was more drag on the car with the windows open, but he was not running the AC. So basically, the AC is using the same amount of energy as you rolling the windows down to the car, making the car less aerodynamic. We are not talking about that big of a difference with these things, but of course, the government's into the EPA rating fuel mileage, so they all run to this crazy computer crap. So when one of these modern clutchless variable displacement compressor goes bad, it could be the compressor itself is breaking down with the little valves inside. It could be the computer that controls it that's breaking down. It could be the wiring that's breaking down. It makes the level of complexity of analyzing these go sky high, and it's going to cost you a fortune. So like I said, I'm going to try to show you how to keep it from breaking in the first place. And the first thing is to check the battery every once in a while. If the battery's weak, replace the stupid thing now, not later. It'll save your AC, it'll save your alternator, it'll save all kinds of things. Even though your car might start up, it still could be too weak, and it's straining all the electronics. You'll get voltage surges, and it can wipe out these stupid computer-controlled AC systems. Because understand one thing, look at the tiny wires on these computer-controlled variable compressors. Tiny little wires. They use 5-volt reference signals, not much power. Voltage surges can easily destroy those. You know, the solenoids are going to break. I see them break all the time. You got all that pressure and heat inside the compressor. Of course those solenoid systems are going to break. And when they break, guess what? You got to buy a new compressor. There's no externally services part. You'd have to take the part and rebuild it. And nobody rebuilds these things. You throw them away and buy another one. It's a perfect example of our throwaway society. Well, you don't want to throw it away. You want to take care of it. Now, the next thing to do to make these outrageously complex systems last as long as possible is this. Check your AC condenser. This might look like the car radiator, but it's the condenser. The radiator's on the other side. This is the AC condenser that removes the heat. If it's covered with bugs, it will restrict airflow. Air is what's cooling it. You restrict airflow, the pressures of your compressor go higher and wear out faster. Make sure your cooling fans work too. Strangely enough, even though this is a brand new 2022 Tacoma, look, it has a mechanical fan, not electronic. Most vehicles today have electronic fan. Make sure they work correctly. If, let's say you're driving your car and it's hot, you got your AC on, and you notice your temperature gauge is usually here. Let's say it runs a little bit hotter. Well, that often means that one of your two cooling fans isn't working. So if your car is running somewhat hotter, do this. Start it up, turn the AC on full blast, and make sure both cooling fans are working. That one's blowing, and that one's blowing. If they aren't, fix them sooner than later. Because if you wait, those pressures are getting higher, it can destroy the compressor much faster. These complex variable displacement compressors, which many cars use these days, one, they cost a fortune themselves. Two, they're almost impossible to rebuild. So if somebody's going to try to sell you a rebuilt unit, do not buy a rebuilt unit. They are too complicated. They're expensive. And even figuring out what's wrong with them is expensive. Because let's say you shorted out the computer system and this isn't working. You put gauges and it's not blowing, it's not compressing, it's not sucking. You might think the compressor's bad. That may not be the case. I've had many customers bring me vehicles and they'll say, look, we replaced the compressor, it still doesn't work. And then I find out that it wasn't their old compressor. The computer system was not sending electricity to the variable displacement compressor plates to make them work at 0 or 100%. And when they put a new compressor on, of course, it did the same thing. It did nothing. You really need a guy like me with fancy equipment to analyze that stuff, and that costs money. Most mechanics at that level that understand the technology, that have paid thousands of dollars for equipment, charge $150 an hour and up to work on your car. So you want to avoid that. Now, like I say, maintaining them is a good idea, because if you buy the right vehicle, 94 Celica still has the original compressor. 2007 Matrix still has the original compressor. And it's not here now, but my wife's 2002 Lexus ES300 still has the original compressor. You take care of them, you buy a Toyota, that's part of the deal. They'll last longer and they work better. They don't break down much. But you still got to maintain them. And of course, if you have a more modern car, don't forget about the cabin air filter. They're hiding away inside the glove box. This one's real easy to get to. You pull the tabs off, take the cover off. There's the filter. I just changed it so it's clean. If you don't change it, don't even know you have one, it's covered with crud. The air will not flow right. The system will back up. The pressure will increase because it's not working right. And you're going to wear the AC system out prematurely. Those filters don't cost much. Just change them, clean them every once in a while. That's one of the bigger maintenance things that everybody forgets. And another good tip for AC is don't park your car under trees, especially evergreen trees. The intake will sock them in. The needles get inside and clog everything up. Then you get water inside because it builds a little dam. Instead of draining under the car, the condensation from the evaporator, it clogs up. Then, of course, it won't work right. And if you get enough water in there, you end up shorting the system out. And if you've ever priced the replacement of AC blower assemblies like this one, where you got to take a whole dash apart to replace it, and it costs a fortune, you'd wish you didn't park under those trees anymore. If you buy a modern car, there's no way you can escape the complexity of modern AC systems. They call them HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. It's all system tied in together with microprocessors and stuff. Now you know how to keep them from breaking in the first place. What do they say? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, in this case, the prevention is pretty cheap. Clean filters, clean bugs off. Check your battery and replace it if it's showing it's weak instead of waiting. Easy stuff that can be done relatively cheaply compared to spending thousands repairing one of these complex systems when it breaks down. Often because it was overstressed from these simple problems you can fix yourself before they become a big one. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.